fractions to decimals with number chips. This is the football version, and this is the digital lesson that walks students through the steps of changing a fraction to a decimal. So it starts out with just some very common multiplication problems. So we want to prepare students to change their fraction to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. So they need to know what they multiply by each of these numbers in order to get 100. So this first slide's pretty easy. Students are going to move these chips, and they're going to move them in the correct place to show the multiplication. So 50, you're going to multiply by 2, so they click and hold on the 2, and they can move it into place. 25, we're going to multiply by 4, and they just need to know these very simple conversions. 20 multiplied times 5, 10 times 10, and 5 times 20. So this is also a good slide to practice moving the chips. So the next slide, students have more numbers. They're going to look to see what they're going to multiply each of these numbers by in order to get an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. So it just follows the previous slide. Now, every slide has all of the numbers the students need. So if they get down to the end of the slide and the numbers aren't working, they know they've made an error and they need to go back and check. So in that way, it's self-checking. So on this slide, they know they have to multiply by 2. So if they multiply the denominator by 2, they have to also multiply the numerator by 2. And that gives them an equivalent fraction of 18 hundredths. Same thing with the other 3 problems. Here they know they have to multiply by 4 to get 100. They're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number, and that gives them an equivalent fraction of 20 hundredths, and so on. They're also going to get a little practice here on slide 4, learning their place value. So it's just a review, should be a review for the students, and it tells them where to place each of the numbers by place value. So for example, place your 4 in the ones place. So they're going to click and hold on the edge of the 4, put it in the ones place. The 1 goes in the tenths place, 8 in the hundreds place, and so on. Now the next slide gives the very first lesson in converting a fraction to a decimal. So these 3 fractions already have 100 in the denominator. If they do that, then this number here in the numerator, the number on the far right in the ones place, will go here in their decimal. It will go in the hundredths place. So 49 hundredths would look like this. That 9 has to go in the hundredths place. And that makes this number in the front a 0. So make sure these numbers are the same, the numbers that the arrows are pointing to. So 13 hundredths, we know the 3 is going to have to go in the hundredths place because it's a fraction with 100 in the denominator. 180 hundredths, that 0 is going to have to go in the hundredths place. And so their decimal will look like this. So the next slide, they're going to be converting these fractions that already have 100 in the denominator into decimals. So 55 hundredths. They just need to know where to place those numbers. And 82 hundredths. So on. Next slide, same thing. Now this one, they have one that's a little tricky, 5 100ths. Well, that means the 5 is going to have to go here, and the other 2 numbers would be zeros. Now the next slide, they're actually going to be converting to equivalent fractions. So we want the denominator to be 100. So they're going to move these hundreds into the denominator. They know here they're going to have to multiply by 50. So if they multiply the numerator by 50, they're going to get 50 hundredths. And then they can go ahead and convert it to a decimal. 3/4, we know we have to multiply by 25. So 3 times 25 would be 75. And then they're going to convert that to a decimal. Same thing on the next slide and the next. Now, sometimes they can't convert directly to 100, so they may need to simplify their fraction first. So here, if they have 6/40ths, they know they can divide the numerator and denominator by 2 to get an equivalent fraction of 3/20ths. Now that it's simplified, now they can convert it to a fraction with 100 in the denominator by multiplying numerator and denominator by 5. So now they have 15/100ths, and then they can go ahead and convert that to a decimal. Same thing on the next problem. We're going to have to simplify first and then change it to a fraction with 100 in the denominator. Now, they can't always change their denominator to 100. In this case, if we simplified, we'd get 1/8. Well, 8 you can't multiply times anything to get 100. So we have to use long division. So here they're going to do the long division with their number chips. And again, they have to use every single number. 8 goes into 10 one time. 8 times 1 is 8. Subtract. We get 2. And these numbers are going to be zeros. So we're just going to bring down a 0. 8 goes into 20 two times. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract. They get 4. Bring down a 0. And now 8 will go evenly into 45 times. So now here they get their decimal answer. Same thing on the next slide. And then the final slide, they've got an example of a repeating decimal answer. So they're going to have sixes. Each one of these is going to be 6, and it just keeps on repeating when they do the division. So make sure that they take this little line. They're going to click and hold on it, move it above the 6 to show that it's repeating. Then they're given some decimals vocabulary: terminating decimal, non-terminating decimal, and repeating decimal. So that is the digital lesson, Fractions to Decimals with Number Chips, and this is the football version.